The Marvel Cinematic Universe has seen a lot of powerful items being thrown around. Most recently, of course, it was the Infinity Gauntlet. It seems that Thor's father Odin had a vested interest in acquiring such items, as his vault on Asgard has seen quite a few on display over the years. In fact, it's specifically housed 10 items of power that we know of, and in this video, we'll be ranking them in order of importance in the grand scheme of the MCU. We'll take into account things like where they fit into Asgard's history, how they contributed to Asgard's dominance, and how they link to other characters both from the MCU and the comic books. Let's get into it. The least important item in Odin's vault in the MCU is undoubtedly the tuning fork. Even in the comic books, it's a highly obscure item that's about as useful as it sounds, even though its name doesn't actually have really anything to do with its actual power. It's used to summon a being called the Lurking Unknown to Asgard. The Lurking Unknown is an extra-dimensional creature that feeds on the fear of other life forms. It's big and purple, and in that sense, not too dissimilar in appearance to Thanos. Odin sometimes summoned it to test young Asgardians in a rite of passage of sorts. It claims to have destroyed countless worlds and to have never been defeated. But when Odin granted Jane Foster the powers of an Asgardian and she was overcome with fear in its presence, Thor intervened and defeated it rather easily, which somewhat undermined the creature's claims. So yeah, the tuning fork? Pretty useless, really. Seeing the Lurking Unknown summoned by it in the MCU would be pretty underwhelming now. And thankfully, it was no doubt obliterated when Surtur destroyed Asgard in 2017's Thor, Ragnarok. Another relatively minor item of power in Odin's MCU vault was the WARLOCK'S Eye. In the comics, the WARLOCK'S Eye is a quite obscure mystical weapon that was used unsuccessfully by Hirokin against Odin, Thor, and the Warriors 3 when he attempted to conquer Asgard. The WARLOCK'S Eye utilizes a powerful mind-controlling enchantment that very few can resist, but it wasn't enough for Hirokin to come out on top in his efforts against his home realm. In the MCU, all this item's presence in Odin's vault proves is that at some point in the past, Asgard presumably won a battle against Hirokin and whatever forces he allied with. When Surtur destroyed Asgard, it will have been destroyed along with the other items in the vault at the time, and if we're being frank about it, it's not exactly going to be missed going forward in the MCU. Another relatively unimportant item in Odin's vault in MCU terms was the Tablet of Life and Time, although it does sound important when you describe it.
We found it, the Tablet of Time.
In the comic books, the tablet presented a biochemical formula for a serum called the Lifeline Formula, which could rejuvenate, heal, and grant its user the chance to reach the full evolutionary potential of its race, effectively turning the user into an immortal, near omnipotent being. The rune markings on the tablet, which can be seen on the MCU version of the item, can be translated as those who sit above in shadow. That's a reference to the gods of the gods, beings who, in the comics, are omnipotent and omniscient, and draw their life energy from the surge of energy released by Ragnarok. Such is their power that they essentially cause the cycle of death and rebirth to continue. So yeah, all that sounds pretty major, and if we saw those gods in the MCU, it would be pretty cool, even though they're fairly obscure characters, but there's no reference to them so far, and it's highly unlikely that we'll ever see them in the franchise. Now, it might seem weird to place an item with no power whatsoever in any other position than rock bottom, but in this case, it's less about its power and more about what it both represents and suggests. We are, of course, talking about the fake Infinity Gauntlet that Odin had in his vault.
Odin's treasures.
Fake.
For starters, it showed that Odin knew exactly what an Infinity Gauntlet and the 6 Infinity Stones looked like, which kind of suggests that at some point, he might have been in possession of them all. But it also shows Odin to be something of a vain man, perhaps trying to pass off the fake as the real thing to falsely portray himself and his home realm as the most powerful force in the universe, in spite of the fact that, in reality, the Infinity Stones were scattered across the universe. It represents a thirst for power, and it obviously directly connects Asgard to the whole Infinity Saga of the MCU, in spite of the fact that the one on show in Asgard's vault didn't actually possess any power whatsoever. The Casket of Ancient Winters was an ancient relic and weapon that once belonged to the frost giants of the Jotunheim. Although in spite of the fact that it was undoubtedly extremely powerful, Hela seemed very unimpressed by it in Thor Ragnarok.
Weak.
The Frost Giants used it to vanquish enemy armies and conquer enemy realms by virtue of its ability to produce and then project an infinite icy wind capable of freezing whole landscapes and plunging entire worlds into an ice age. It was captured by the armies of Asgard in 965 AD in a fierce battle with the Frost Giants on Earth. It would later be destroyed along with several other items in Odin's vault during the destruction of Asgard. But it was an important reminder of one of Asgard's most fierce and glorious victories, one that Odin was most proud of. The Destroyer was an enchanted Asgardian armor used primarily to guard Odin's vault, which made it a very important item in there. It could, however, also be used as a weapon against its master's enemies, its master being whoever the ruler of Asgard and wielder of the powerful spear Gungnir was at any given time. The Destroyer possessed superhuman strength and durability, the ability to fire a potent energy beam powered by the Odin Force, the ability to rearrange itself, which gives it an almost unlimited range of motion, and a scrying ability that enabled its master to perceive whatever was going on around it, even from halfway across the universe. The crown of Surtur was the headpiece worn by the mighty fire demon by the name of, well,
Surtur.
When it was merged with the Eternal Flame, it was capable of increasing his power immensely and transforming him from being around 15 feet tall to being the size of a mountain. Surtur was one of the most powerful beings in the MCU and a long-standing enemy of Asgard. And for Thor to have acquired his crown was quite the feat, even though the fire demon wasn't at his most powerful at the time of the confrontation between the pair. He was still a formidable opponent and commanded an army of fire demon soldiers. Having his crown in Odin's vault was the kind of trophy that would scare away even the most powerful enemies of Asgard. It was destroyed when Surtur destroyed Asgard at the end of Thor Ragnarok, fulfilling the prophecy that also resulted in his own demise. On a strongly related note to the crown of Surtur, we now come to the
Eternal Flame.
The Eternal Flame is a mystical, inextinguishable flame that contains the true power of the aforementioned fire demon Surtur. It's capable of resurrecting deceased individuals. While it represented a past victory over Surtur in exactly the way the crown of Surtur did, it gets a higher ranking on this list in terms of its importance for two reasons. The first reason is that it was in Odin's vault for longer than Surtur's crown. We first saw it in 2011's Thor movie, and we can only assume it had been there for a very long time. It represents a past victory over the fire demon that presumably was against him when he was at its most powerful. But the second and main reason it ranks higher is because it's far more useful. The fact that the Eternal Flame can resurrect the dead simply means it's more powerful than the crown. While it has not been stored in Odin's vault since we, as an audience, were first introduced to the MCU, there's evidence that Mjolnir has been stored in there at times in the past, and that's enough to include it on this list. And if it's going to be on this list, it absolutely has to be classed as one of the most important items to have been in there. Mjolnir was, of course, the powerful warhammer wielded by Thor that granted him a bunch of amazing abilities. While we later learned that he could channel lightning without it, Mjolnir did grant Thor the powers of flight and weather manipulation, making it a very useful tool in combat and various other situations. Of course, in addition to Thor, we've also seen the Vision and Captain America wielding it, but it no longer exists in the main MCU timeline. Having been destroyed by Hela in Thor Ragnarok, the old version was plucked from 2014 in Avengers Endgame, but Captain America returned it to its original timeline at the movie's climax. Without a doubt, the most important item in Odin's vault was the Tesseract.
That's not bad.
The Infinity Stone that was otherwise known as the Space Stone. In 2011's Captain America, the First Avenger, the Red Skull literally described it as
The jewel of Odin's treasure room.
which says everything you need to know about it. It's been in there on more than one occasion. For Red Skull to have said what he said, it was obviously in there before World War II, and we know it went back after the events of 2012's The Avengers. The Tesseract was an incredibly powerful item that enabled instantaneous travel to anywhere in the universe, as well as granting its wielder the power of telekinesis, such as when Thanos used it to throw a moon at several MCU heroes on Titan. But Odin obviously thought very highly of it, and with very good reason. Having an Infinity Stone in Asgard sent a message to the rest of the universe that it was a realm not to be trifled with, that's for sure. What do you think was the most important item in Odin's vault in the MCU? And did we get the order right? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Screen Rant for more great videos like this one. See you next time, Midgardians!